You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality. All right, guys, we have a special treat for you today on Lemon's Listening Library where we share the story behind the stories. I am Randie Lemons, author in the fantasy world, or R.L. Rose if you're into the romance side of things. We have an amazing guest and, as always, our amazing co-star. So thank you for listening in. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Kathy Ireland, and I am a reader. I do ARC reads, ALC listens. I listen a lot to audiobooks, but I love to go to conventions, and I am pretty involved in the whole reading world.
All right. So, Summer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Summer England. I'm absolutely titillated that there is a Kathy Ireland and a Summer England all in one place. How very exciting.
Exactly.
I am on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm a full-time classical actress. I am also a mother. And I just finished my first cozy fantasy that is out on submission right now, and I am working on 2 other projects right now. I am big into Bookstagram, book talk, all of that, everything. I'm a huge reader, also very excited to get into the writing game. So that's me.
It's exciting.
That is so fun. I love that, like, when people have a different background, especially like acting and stuff like that, coming into the book world, because you give so much more life to everything that, us non-actors are like, and then you can do it. You can just like
It is very fun to sort of like write out a scene of dialogue in a book and then be able to do like a little skit of it online. And I mean, other people can do that as well, but it is fun as an actor because it's sort of in your wheelhouse. Now, ask me to do something else that take apart a sentence structure grammatically, and I'm going to be like, what? Well, let me just act it for you.
I have an editor for a reason.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I think it's very funny. Like, like you said, you're like, I've been training for this. So whenever you do that stuff, it's not like we can't do it, but you're like, I have the actual experience and the training to do this. And so it just makes it a little bit more fun, and you can kind of let loose a little bit, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's just like also a different way to market a book. Like when I'm going at the marketing, I'm going at it from like a scene to scene situation instead of like tropes or I'm acting out the tropes because that's in my wheelhouse. But I really enjoy seeing different authors based on their own backgrounds and how they decide to market their books because it's always interesting no matter where it's at. It's just, however is resonating with you and your audience.
And I feel like that's something that's kind of lacking in the book world and that's why, we started this podcast, is that there is something going on behind the scene. Like there's a person that has written that book that has their own unique background, their own unique style. And that doesn't really get highlighted a lot unless they're like really famous and then they have, the select interviews and whatnot. But I think helping readers and people who consume books and audiobooks understand why they wrote that story, that person as a person, the author as a person. I think it's huge. I think it's lacking, though.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think it's something whenever I'm listening to a podcast or I'm reading something about an author or an actor or whatever, what I'm really interested in is the process of the A to B of how this story came to be, because sometimes it's harrowing and sometimes it's like just sort of a happenstance sort of situation. And I don't know if it's my like autistic brain being like collect all the data of things, but it's never not helpful and interesting to learn about and hear.
I agree. I'm the same way with that too. So tell us your story. I would love to hear your A to B on how you got here.
Okay, like from an author perspective of how I started writing.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
well, I mean, even if so, there's some things that I read kind of what you had submitted, and I'm interested in, even the nitty-gritty stuff, like whenever you went through your divorce, or, any kind of stuff that you went through in your past that shaped you into the human you are, and just overcoming, the hardships, or, just situations that kind of fucking sucked.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so 3 years ago, my life sort of blew up irrevocably, and I had a hand in picking apart every single part of my life. I came from a very fundamentalist religion that was very cult adjacent, if not cult-esque. And I also married into that. And I had a kiddo while I was in graduate school, which was a surprise. And so I was in the thick of it in every type of situation. And I decided that I could not live this life anymore. I was also in a situation where I've always been a career-oriented person. I went to school to get my master's in Shakespeare and performance, and I had a kid, and I was going to finish that out, and then I was going to go into a career as an actor. But coming from a fundamentalist religion and marrying into that, all of a sudden, once sort of my feet hit the pavement and I had the opportunities coming at me of starting a career, it was all of a sudden like, well, you're not going to be a fit mother if you're going to have a career. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I will not be living this life where every day I come home and I'm, emotionally pummeled to the ground because I decided to also have things outside of my house that I love, which is a reality for many people outside of fundamentalist religion. Females and careers can be very difficult. So 3 years ago, all of that blew up and got a divorce, and my family sort of shunned me. So I'm like, I lost everything all at once. And there's something very gritty and harrowing that happens when you are a person with $50 in your bank account. You have no access to your funds before that for reasons, and a kid to feed. And also, I was unwilling to sacrifice my own self and the things that I wanted to do. I still wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a creator, and I didn't want to do anything that I didn't want to do in an 8 to 5 because I didn't have, there was just many, many different things. So that's sort of the precipice that I was at. So I started acting. I had a young kid going through a divorce. And during that time, I started posting some videos on social media just as kind of an outlet, because I really struggle with connecting with people. And it's not even necessarily that when I'm talking to them, I'm not feeling connection. It's just sort of like, it just doesn't come naturally to me, like when I'm going through something, to be able to like share it, because I still have difficulties unmasking with the person in front of me. So it's like my thoughts aren't even there in the well. Like I could be going through something, but when there's an active human in front of me, I'm just not thinking about it. I'm thinking about other things. And so social media, I just sort of like started posting some videos as a weird outlet, not thinking that anybody would necessarily watch them. And at the height of going through a divorce and all of this sort of really life pummeling me into the ground, I was also actively falling in love. And that's sort of how I got very popular on TikTok. I did a retelling of The Neighbor and I Falling in Love, it was a retelling of my diary. And it was a way for me to sort of process kind of a year later everything that I was going through at that time, because I hadn't actually processed it. Like I had journaled about it, but I had never sat down and told anybody that, because I, again, struggled to do so when there's an active live human in front of me. So I did it in front of a camera. And then from there, I was so interested to see how people were resonating with the story, and they wanted to hear more. So I was like, I wonder how far the storytelling aspect, because of me as an actor and because of me as somebody who has a Shakespeare and performance degree and has studied script analysis, how far can storytelling go in this, digital creator era where everything's short form content? So I made this huge, I think 72-part episode situation where I just told my diaries, and it was kind of like online therapy in the way that I was processing out to the world. And I really wanted if it was for anybody, one, it was for me, the girl I was 3 years ago when I had $50 and nothing to my name. And I was like, hun, you're going to be fine. It's fine. And you did it. You did it. You scrapped your way up, and it's okay. And two, I also was really keen on kind of presenting a full human experience online that also involved me actively making a lot of mistakes and being self-aware in the moment, like, yeah, I'm making a ton of mistakes in this situation. That's life. When you go through insane things like this, it is, especially coming from like a fundamentalist religion, I had not made a lot of the mistakes that most people make at like 18 or 19. I was 25 and was fully like, I'm going to collect data, as my autistic brain loves to do, and half of that is about failing. And I was just, that I told that story, and then the author part came in. I never intended or had any dream about the story becoming as popular as it was, or my storytelling style to become popular in any type of way. I was just telling the story. That was the only thing I was interested in. I kind of rarely read the comments, and I never checked my DMs because my object permanence with my phone and with my past versions of myself, even if it was a video I posted that day, it's gone. Who is she? I don't know her. I've never heard of her. Um, and I started getting DMs from agents, from literary agencies saying, I think we could really do something with this story. And genuinely, I surpassed many of them simply on vibes. I had nothing to go off of. I'm sure that they're great people, but there was just something in my gut that was like, this isn't a good fit. Or it was really about kind of like, oh, if we act on this now and we write this before the end of your story, then this is the type of money that we're looking at. And I was like, well, I'm not setting out to do. This was never supposed to be anything other than, hey, I'm letting my autistic self from a few years ago process through what happened. The internet happens to be watching because that's the day and age we live in. And then I got my agent through that. And there was something about the way that she phrased her message and sort of our rapport back and forth. And then I met with her, and it was so obvious that she believed in storytelling. And so we set out to write like a memoir of the neighbor story. And then suddenly now I'm doing a cozy fantasy because in National Novel Writing Month, I was like, I'm going to finish my memoir. But sometimes when you look at the stars, if you look at one star, all of the stars around it, you can see. That's kind of what happens when I write. So I was writing the memoir, and then I had this cozy queer story in my head, and I wrote a bunch of that, and now that's the one that's finished on submission. So life is crazy. That's how we got there.
That is amazing.
I love that. So welcome to the author mind. You will have different plots fighting over attention in your mind, and you're going to have to focus on which one you want to complete, or do you want to jump around? And that is the struggle and the beauty of it.
Genuinely, I mean, it's like a superpower. You know what I mean? And I think we just can't shame our brains. Our brains are creatives. They can't help it. They have 7 million things they need to do.
I love that. I love the idea of taking like a gentle stance with the struggles we go through. Like that was something that I realized as I was going through my mental health journey, is like there is an inner child in there that just needs to be understood, needs to be listened to. And like a lot of times when I was upset or angry or anything like that, I just needed to turn internally and just like give myself a mental hug.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I mean, once you're an adult, nobody's hanging your art up on the fridge, metaphorically or actually. You're the only person who's doing that. And so, no matter how bad it is or how good it is, if my inner child is bringing art home, I'm like, all right, it's going on the fridge. Okay.
Well, and I think too, the strength that you get from, I was a single mom for a while too. I had 3 kids, and down to the last penny, you're like it is rough. It's hard. And you have so many, mom guilt is like a real thing for sure. And so I think that having that outlet, because I journaled through my marriage, like I journaled a lot. It's so it's so important to have some sort of an outlet to be able to process all of those emotions that you, as a basically new adult and going through all these experiences that you didn't get to experience as a teenager or whatever, like you got to have that outlet. You have to have that way to process all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I feel too like it feels very human to me for big experiences to happen. And so, like, when you tell it, it needs to be bigger than just a journal. Because I remember when I was in the thick of like going to court unnecessarily and like having to submit my rehearsal schedule because it was like, see, she has a career. She's an unfit mother. I was so angry. And I was like, journaling's not enough. I need to like shout this from the rooftops. I'm feeling everything that a human can possibly feel, but it's also at the end of the day, it's like also motherhood. And that has so many different connotations atop of it. And then there's like a fiscal element. It's just too big. It doesn't fit in a journal.
Not at all.
Even like kind of like how you said, the social media day and age, the conservative side of it, yes, stay home, be a mom, that sort of sign. But the other side of it is the world expects women right now to be everything. They expect you to be the boss babe. They expect you to be the mom. They expect you to be the doting wife. There's all this expectations of women right now that, if you don't cook with, a dress on or makeup, then, that's also a failure. So I think just turning off the outside noise and finding who you are, who you want to be. You can still work and be a mother and be amazing at it, but just you have to, like, kind of just quieting, not completely turning off the outside world, but just quieting that and just like, okay, who am I and what do I want and who do I want to be, the person that I want to be.
Absolutely, 100%. And at the end of the day, I I have like I want everything. That is my that is the girl in me. I always want everything. I want to do it all and I will absolutely do it all. I think that I struggled with not with villainizing myself for wanting it all. Of like there was a part of me, and I worked on it in therapy, of feeling kind of this selfishness of I want a career and I want to be a mom and I want this and I want that. And she was like, that's great. Then want it. And I was like, oh, you can just want it. You can want it all and do it. It's just like really hard and it's not romanticized. And sometimes when you want everything, there are things that is going to make you feel like nothing. And that just is what it is. And it's all part of like God, reaching for the height means you're falling the most. And that is a beautiful, wretched part of being alive in the best way. I like the extremities of it, but yeah, you're right. There's a lot of noise in like the 90 seconds of look at my life as, an 8 to 5 situation. And I'm thinking like, that's amazing. I'm not judging you for that. I do know on the back end of that, how are you like what are you doing to calm yourself at night? How are your friendships? Are you always are you the person who's always busy and your friends kind of hate you because you're always busy? Because I get that. You know what I mean? Like, what is the behind the scenes situation of it?
Yeah, when you take out that 9 to 5, what's left?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
One thing that I love, when you were talking about how you chose like your agent or who you worked with, I love that it was basically by intuition. Like, what were the vibes and how did you feel with interactions with this person? And it wasn't, based on money or how much money can I make or how famous can I get. No, it was, how do I connect with that person? And I think that just shows, an incredible amount of character.
Well, I think it also kind of goes to your neurodivergence a little bit. Like a lot of people want to put the stigma of like you can't connect, you don't understand. There's a block because you are a little bit more awkward, which is, I think, our superpower. And I think that that is something that a lot of people don't realize is there is an intuition with neurodivergent people that is, I feel like, almost a layer deeper than just what people are taught. Like, because everyone else societally, they mimic whatever their parents do, the smile, all that stuff is mimicking. That's not necessarily there for neurodivergent people. They kind of miss those cues, those visual cues and body language and stuff. And so who you are and how you connect with people is almost a deeper layer of authenticity.
Absolutely. And that is so it genuinely is a superpower because as soon as I meet somebody, I'm like, vibes, done. I understand based on this what the social interactions of this are. And I am deciding right now if I want to participate, if I'm forced to participate because this is a situation, or if you're so wonderful that I'm like, I would like to be around your light. I am a moth and you're a nice, sweet light. So yeah, that's how I felt about my agent is like I didn't want to write a book until I met her and I was like, well, I'll do whatever if it means I get to collaborate with this fantastic person who just so believes in storytelling and is so convicted about it that, of course, my sweet little autistic brain was like, yes, great. Perfect.
It is a gem when you find those people who are not doing it for the money and are not doing it for that kind of thing. They're doing it because they're passionate about it and you can feel that. It's hard to find those people, but they're treasures when you do.
Absolute treasures. And it's, yeah, absolute treasures. Just the most, oh, I can't even put it into words. And I am now a writer and I can't put into words how special and rare it is. You're so right. Because I mean, we live in a capitalistic world. We're all trying to play the cards we've been dealt. There's no around that. But there are some people who are like, yes, I am playing the cards I've been dealt, but I believe in it so hard. And I love them. I love them for that.
And I think too, you have the cards that you're dealt, but you can trade in a couple cards and get new ones, and then play that hand. And I feel like that's so hard that as women, like it is a struggle sometimes to really get that leg up, to get the cards that we are dealt and make a beautiful thing.
Well,
Absolutely.
and not be grateful for the cards. Like I feel like there's another piece, like when we have the cards, they're like, you should be grateful for this. You are, you're born of privilege, you're this, you're that. Be grateful for it. Be grateful for what you got. But then it's also like, I don't want that though. I want to go deeper.
Yeah. Well, and you're also kind of like defined by the cards you have, if you will. Like that's how the world perceives you as whatever. And so when you trade a card in, you're inherently sacrificing some type of perception that somebody had of you in a way that could benefit you, or it could be like, why are you doing that? Why would you do that? You know what I mean? It's always, one card for another there is sacrifices in there sometimes, depending on what the deck is, if you will.
I love all the metaphors and all the analogies of things. It's great. I don't know if you experienced this summer when you were going through and this just made me think of something. When you're going through your mental health journey, was analogies easier for you to understand than someone just giving you like the glob of, how to work through stuff? Whenever they were like, okay, you have this person inside your brain, and when you're angry, they take over and they take control of the will. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much more sense than just telling me to control my emotions.
Absolutely, to a T. I had to ask my therapist because I was in therapy for 2 years, and it took us until like the last session for me to get screened for autism. We did a bunch of different things before that, but after a while, I was like, "Can you like put it into art term or cooking, anything? Because you explaining it on like a human basis, I'm sure is helpful." I'm like, this could not feel more distant from how I understand the world.
That's so funny. I knew you'd understand that. That was something that I went
Yes.
through, and I was like, when you explain it to me in a way that is not, like you said, human, it is so
Yes.
much more helpful.
Yeah, and it also takes the stakes out of it. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I'm being presented with data and a rule. Great, I can get that. But when there's like even a human element, my brain's like, all right, how do I match what needs to be done here? You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely understand.
So and I had another question kind of going back to your childhood. You said that there was a lot of judgment based off of, how you were kind of wanting to do things. I'm assuming it was people that was close to you, that judgment came from, that made you feel that sense of, questioning whether or not what you're doing was right.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, I grew up in a fundamentalist religion. I was homeschooled. All my friends were in that. And then I went to my undergrad, also in a school that practiced that religion. And so every single one of my connections that I've had for longer than 2 years, graduate school was different. My graduate school was an entirely different experience, but those were very new connections. So yeah, when I started making the decisions, what that was always my plan. Even from a young age, I was always career oriented. And that's what I wanted to do. And I was very ambitious. And I sort of had a perpetual FOMO about life. And I was always kind of looked down on about that. Or people would be like, you're going to have a kid and then it'll totally change your priorities. And I remember thinking when I was really young, that I was like, I will prove you so wrong. Even if I do have a kid, I will strap them to me and they will go to school with me. And that was a foretelling. And my kid came to graduate classes with me. And so, yeah, when I got a divorce, the thing about growing up in that is like, it's not just I'm looking down on your choices. It's that all of the sudden you are putting yourself and your child in danger of hell. Like it's life or death on the line. And so I was getting bombarded with all of these calls and questions, and like, you're not thinking about your child, you're so selfish, and all of these things from every single person that was close to me, and parental figures, and more than that, that were sort of kind of ingrained into my bone marrow, whether I was separated from them or not. And so it was really not even like deconstructing from a religion as it was rebuilding my actual bones of my body is what it felt like, because I had to take them all out because they were all structures that I had grown up in. and relationships that were no longer like killed me to have to sever myself from, and were so painful to watch them actively walk away when I was kind of at the lowest point of my life. And, you know, it was what it was. But yeah, it was really every single part of my life was up for, and everybody felt entitled to making some very demeaning comments and and the thing that would kill a mom the most is, you know, like, you're ruining your kid's life. And of course, I mean, in the middle of having the conversation, I looked strong, and then I would go to, you know, it took years for me to recover from those, even if I didn't believe them. It's awful to hear, you know, your mother say that to you as a mom. It just is.
Yeah, that's a psychological level. It's not just like, how do you get over it? It is like, it goes deeper than it's psychological.
Absolutely. And it's something that I'm always probably going to grapple with because, I mean, of course, you have societal pressures. It's always there. Mom guilt is like the experience of a person with a kid.
You get a badge of mom guilt. You get a
It
badge of
doesn't
mom
end
guilt.
either as they get
And
older.
no, I know I've just accepted that as long as my kid, I will always feel a little bit guilty about something. That's just how it's going to be. But yeah, those layers of everyday, because I mean, also you're at the lowest point anyways of like, no one wants to go through a divorce. No
No.
one's like, that was the best experience of my life, even if it was really good later on, you know? So it's tough, tough stuff.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, like divorce also, it comes along with like you're realizing, one, you chose that person. Like it does kind of shed the blame kind of a little bit back on you, where you do have to own that, you know, if you have enough introspection to do so. Like, you know, I did choose this person. I did choose how long I stayed with them. And then, you know, just realizing that's not who I want to be, growing from it. Or a lot of people sadly don't have that introspection and then just go and make the repeat.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it is really easy, even if you feel like you're the, you know, quote unquote, most wronged person or what have you. It's still like, I wasn't dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I actively made all those choices. And in the back of my head, I mean, I got married at 19. I was a teeny weeny baby. But even then, I was like, okay, we definitely have differing, you know, beliefs on how specifically women should be, but it'll be fine.
Oh yeah.
Reader, it was not fine. It
Put the
was not
blinders
fine.
on.
Yeah. I actively
Fine.
made that
Not
choice. Yeah.
okay.
And I think it's good to take ownership. You know what I mean? Of like my
Absolutely.
biggest successes and my biggest failures. That's fine. That's part of it. That's going to happen.
And that is, I do think that is something that, honestly, it's hard for people to do, is to, if they've been in a, you know, in a bad relationship or whatever, like, my opinion, there's a huge victim mentality that can overtake thought processes, or, you know, but eventually you have to get around to that and be like, okay, well, I made choices. I stayed in this, like, you know, Randie was saying, I stayed here in this relationship for this length of time. And, you know, like, what was I doing to actively get myself out of that? And that is not to say, look, I understand that people in, you know, abusive relationships, it is not that easy to just say, well, why don't you just leave? It's not that easy. I totally get that. Like, get it. But you still have to take accountability for your own choices, your own thought processes, and allowing, you know, judgments or whatever to come in and take over who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I'm an active participant in my life. All my bad choices, life happened. Sometimes life happened at me, and that, like, that is what it is. But I don't want to like chalk it all up to like, oh, this horrible thing happened at me. I was in it. I did it, and I got myself out of it. You know, like, and of course there's so many different realities and so many different like situations and reasons for staying, not going, what have you. And I understand those deeply. But yeah, it can be hard to not want to be an active participant in your life a little bit in those bits.
Yeah, to kind of push it's easy to want to push it off onto someone else. Well, they did this or they did that. But
Yeah.
then, you know, the power that comes with owning it, it's like, oh, I had the power to change it. I have the power to change it. And that's what's huge. And I think a lot of people don't realize is the control doesn't go away or, you know, you don't get more control whenever someone else did it. The control comes to you when you are like, I actually can change this. It is, I am, like you said, an active participant. If not, life is happening in front of me and I'm not actually being a part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wish, because I was just talking to a friend about this. It always sucks when there's like an unhealthy relationship dynamic. The person who has, been abused or like it's just not working for them is also the person who has to remedy it, which does suck. Like I wish that wasn't the case. I do. I wish that there was somebody who could be like, I'm taking you out of this so you don't have to be the person who has to do everything all the time. I wish. And it just isn't that way.
Yep.
It just is not that way.
Shining armor coming. It's you. You're the knight in shining armor.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yep.
So I was going to ask you, you started journaling your diaries or whatever, right? To help process through your marriage, through your divorce. And also, is that when you started the TikTok and then working through that, and then it progressed into actually putting it into your memoir? Is that like the progression that you had?
So there was a year gap between when the sort of whole divorce neighbor situation happened and when I started telling it on TikTok, because I've never told it real time, only because I would have definitely wanted consent from the neighbor, my current partner, to tell, this huge long saga. So it was a retelling and sort of allowing myself, now that I had more tools, to be able to process through the moments. And I remember in the times that I was telling it, reading back through journals, I felt every single feeling that I was feeling when I wrote those journals in the moment that I was saying the video. And so even when I told people, and it's still pinned to the top of my profile, that this was a retelling, I think one of the reasons why it felt so present day, I was telling it like it was present day, even though it wasn't, but I felt everything in the moment. I was like, oh my God, I remember actively every part of me is embodied in this because it happened to me, and it's unlocking bits that I wasn't able to explore and say in the time. So that's kind of the progression of the time frame.
And you were reading also, right? Romance books and stuff during this time. Because I mean, I was so excited when I figured out that I connected the two, that you were the guest and the person that I, watch on Instagram, because girl, you cracked me up. Like I died. I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. So I went back and like was looking at more, and but your reviews of some of the books or scenes in the books, hilarious.
Yes. So that was all. I was like retelling something, but I was also just doing videos that I wanted to do, like book reviews and little, garden diaries from when I was working at a garden. I was just sort of, I was just sharing it all because that's just what I wanted my social media to be, is like, this is the thing I'm doing today. So like it or not.
So I have a question. Did the neighbor, like when you were doing the retellings and stuff like that, you said you started feeling all the emotions again. Like, did he like, oh, what's gotten into you? Why are you so lovey today? Because like I imagine a lot of the first mushy feelings were coming back, and you like probably got off there and went and like jumped in his lap or something like that.
Well, I mean, so much of me falling in love with him was sort of me being like a perpetual runaway bride. That was kind of the tension and why it was so long of a saga. Because I mean, I told the video over like a 7-month period of time. It took even longer for us to fall in love than that. Like I compressed our timeline because I was like, I cannot be doing this. No, I just got out. I just got out of something. I will not be going back. I will not be going back. And so sometimes I would, be done like filming a video, and I would see him and I would be like, it is a miracle that you are in this house right now. I just have to say, it is a miracle we are together. It really is. And I mean, what was funny was like, so we had this whole big thing, and I ended up calling things off because he was going back to New York, and then we got cast in a show together. So it was like a real life, just rom-com out of nowhere kind of situation. And we were in that show again this year. And so as I was telling it, I was like, man, I can't believe we lived this life. and we're here and make this work. That's crazy. So I think it was a little less romantic and me being like, whoa, you are real. I can't believe I did that.
That just shifts my perspective of like you going in there just like poking him.
It was
He's here,
genuinely,
it's real.
yeah, it was like looking at a fish. I was like, damn, how do you do that? How do you swim around in there? Crazy. That is what it was like. And still like sometimes he'll be in the house and he'll like make me food and I'm like, whoa, cannot believe this. And then I'll just sort of like back out of the room. I'm sort of like his poltergeist. I just like appear in the corner and I'm like, a boy's in my house. Exit the frame.
One of the ones that I remember you talking about was you had gone on like a date with, I can't remember where you found this person, an app maybe or something, but anyway, you were outside of your apartment kissing and your neighbor
Yes.
like
Yes.
was just standing there and like walked in between you. I can just imagine now knowing, going back, like what was going through his mind. And then also,
Yep. Yeah, it was, yes, quite a harrowing situation. And that person, I've never been on a dating app. I met them, I think, via some type of like, we had a PowerPoint night or something where we did like odd topics. And this guy came in and I was like, oh, he's quiet and mysterious. No, he was just boring. He was weird and boring. But anyways, we were kissing and then the neighbor was there and it was and he said,
that's hilarious.
yeah, that was fun times. And now he's upstairs making me lunch. Weird.
Oh, I'm excited to read your so, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump all over the place. I know we have notes, but I keep getting ideas and this is just how my brain works. So your romance, the book that you're writing, it is inspired by your retelling, or is it something completely different?
Something completely different. So I started out just to kind of go into a little bit of publishing journey or writing story. I started out writing a rom-com memoir. So it was a narrative nonfiction, and it was sort of a pitch of like Emily Henry meets, an actual real life story. And I wrote part of it, had a book proposal, and we got a lot of nice things from acquisition editors. They were like, oh, I love the authorial voice. It was very sweet rejections. And then they were like, I don't know what to do with this, though. This kind of weird rom-com, but it's not a rom-com. Like, how is it going to live on the shelf? And that made total sense. And I was unwilling to change the structure of it. Because I just liked it the way it was. One day, possibly something may happen from it, or I might do a Stranger Than Fiction kind of situation. But during National Novel Writing Month, I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this memoir just to have it done. And that's when I started writing my cozy fantasy, which has zero to do with the actual story. But something that I noticed while I was writing it was I still really wanted to explore the theme of somebody being extremely terrified of love. And that being like kind of how they define their own sense of self is like, I don't let love in because it hurts. Why would I do that? And so that was kind of, but it takes love to find the magic in life. And until you do that, it's, how there's just less magic in life. So that's where the cozy fantasy came from. So while it has nothing to do with our story, it does definitely have to do with why our story existed in the first place and why it took so long to come to fruition was me runaway briding myself until I was finally like, get it. What is wrong with you? Stop it. So that's how it came about.
So your character in that, do you think it was she, or was the character that you wrote in that story, did you maybe have them do situations that you wish you had done differently in real life?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. She definitely, there was sort of like a rule of threes of where she fought it, and then it was like, okay, great. She's got it together now. She's realized it. There wasn't as much of like, oh, I realize I love this person, and then I'm going to live like for like a few months in definite fear of like what happens now, what is going on. She just lived it, and she was like, I'm gonna let myself have this good experience, even if it's just for now. I would have loved to have done that with my own self. I did not do that, but I did give it to my main character.
I find that that's very common with authors. When they experience something, they will have their characters do what they wish they had done, or do something that like work through what they had done but process it differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so nice. It's so nice to like put your character through something hard and then be like, and now we're going to take away a year of turmoil and you're going to make the realization now. Great, done. Sentence done.
Yep. Because you've already gone through it. You've already processed it. You're like, I can make this real without it being 3 months.
Precisely. Precisely. We do not have to linger. No linger.
Hey, Summer, can you explain for our readers the difference between a cozy romance, regular romance? Like, what is the distinctions for that for you?
Yeah. So I think because I write cozy fantasy, that's sort of where my situation is. So cozy fantasy versus fantasy or cozy things, it's just lower stakes for the reader and low trigger. So a lot of times in romance novels and even some fantasy novels, you have war. They could be going through something really traumatic. There could be elements that are, inherently in content warnings of, SA or methods of control or, ED, anything like that. And so those aren't really huge elements in, I would say, things that are marketed as cozy romances and cozy fantasies. And then from like a logistics point, usually it's a smaller town or small village, and the quest that they go on isn't life or death. Even if it feels that way to the character, like it's still, I would say it's still high stakes for the character, whether they're opening a tea shop or they're riding on the back of a dragon. But for the reader knows the entire time everybody's safe. Everything in this little village is quaint inherently, and there will be a happy ending. This isn't a book that's going to be like, and now the reader's left in turmoil. You're sort of guaranteed kind of a nice hug at the end of the book. So that's how cozy fantasy, cozy romance lives in my head.
Nice. Is that one great palate cleanser? So if somebody reads dark romance or dark fantasy, like anything on the dark side, a cozy fantasy, cozy romance would be a great palate cleanser, because you see that all the time, people wanting like a palate cleanser. I've like do that. Like I have usually like something heavier, dark going, but I also have like a rom-com going at the same time. So I can read that right before I go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right before I go to bed. Yeah. And then, so what's the spice level in these sorts of, can you explain that? Like, does that vary? What are your spice levels?
Yes, I think that we are getting increasing spice levels in cozy fantasy, which I am excited about. Originally, at the precipice of cozy fantasy, there was no spice. There was like, I mean, Legends and Lattes probably was sort of the go-to marker of this is when cozy fantasy kind of codified as a genre. And then the books have gotten increasingly spicier since then. And I heard a podcast interview with Rebecca Thorne, who's one of my favorite cozy fantasy authors. She did Can't Spell Treason Without Tea. It features lesbians. It's so fun. She had heard that cozy fantasy was equated with like clean fantasy. And so she added kind of like a spicy scene in her book, because she was like, no, 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 no. And so I think we're getting a few more spice levels. I think it also, again, like if you're doing a cozy fantasy, what type of situation are they in? Of course it's going to be all consensual, because sometimes in dark fantasy romance you have dubious non-consent and things like this, where they're definitely playing with different aspects of that. And then I think cozy fantasy, yeah, we're getting differing levels of spice. That's also why I wanted to write a reason why I wanted to write a cozy fantasy, was because I did want to write a cozy fantasy with spice, because that was the thing that I felt as a reader, as a absolute smut head. I was like, I love this village. I want them to be doing it. I want them to do it at some point. And it can be cozy. Let them do it in a garden. I don't care. But I just, I just want a little bit of it.
Yeah. So we're talking Hallmark movies with spice is what
Precisely.
I love
Precisely.
that. Yeah, I think it's missing for sure.
Yeah. And I also think this is sort of like a random tangent on cozy fantasy. I notice a lot of cozy fantasies usually feature sapphic romances. And I'm like so interested in that as a queer person, and also as somebody who, again, tries to understand the process of things. And part of me is like, I guess it almost, as a reader, it feels safer. Like if a female main character meets another female, I'm automatically assuming everybody's safe. If a female main character is now like, you're put into a crazy situation and there's a guy there, I'm like, ooh, I'm a little bit on edge. What's going to happen? And so, yeah, I'm wondering where the cozy fantasy genre will go from here. But I'm wondering if that's why it's so sapphic centered right now, or queer focused, which I let it continue to be so. I love that.
That's awesome. Now, because I suck at words, what is sapphic?
Yeah, it's lesbians.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Nope. I learn words all the time. I'm an author. That does not mean I know all of them, and I have no problem being like, hey, please help me out.
Oh, yeah. I would love to see the Google search of like really famous authors, because I'm convinced nobody is like quite sure about affect, effect. I can't. Or like how to just spell restaurant just out of the bag. I know.
Or how to, secretly disperse of a body. It gets bad on some of us.
Absolutely. I Googled for my cozy fantasy. I was in the editing process, and I did Google search leaves to wipe one's bum with, like safe outdoor leaves. So
Oh my God.
actively in there, never clearing that search history. Everyone knows.
You know how like you can kind of put your search history into like a safe mode or like a private mode? We need an author mode.
Precisely. We need an author mode. Yeah, it doesn't need to be incognito. It's just is a nice leveling situation. I'm not trying to commit murder. I'm not trying to wipe anything on anything, but I do need to know for research purposes.
That is an important thing to know. However, what leaves you should and should not use, because
Absolutely.
there's some bad ones out there.
Yes, because if I'm going to write a cozy fantasy about a chaotic gardener, she simply must know, if she's going to grow a field of things, of toilet paper in this medieval village, I can't just be putting any leaf in there as an author. I gotta know the species, the genre, how long it's been in use.
Yes.
Precisely. The texture.
Yeah. That's important.
Yep.
Research right there.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna jump again, and this is kind of jumping back to like your childhood, or at least growing up and kind of discovering yourself. You mentioned that they use fear a lot as a tactic to kind of hold you in place of that religion and the way that they believed things. And I do have to commend and say, like, it is so brave to know that that is an ultimate fear that they are threatening you with, and then still have the courage to be like, okay, but who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that really actually did help was because I was neurodivergent, and I was like, but it's not making sense. This doesn't make sense. You were saying this, you're saying you love, 15% of this person. That does not make sense. It just doesn't. And so there was kind of a point in my early 20s that I was like, there's too many incongruities for this to be a space in which I can actively participate for the rest of my life in good conscience and good ethics and in align with myself. But it's hard. It's hard to come to that.
Yeah. No, and especially when it is fear-based. Like, I almost feel like, religions could do so much better if it was like love-based. Like, they would hold a lot more people there if it was like, shower them with love. If they have questions, let's gently answer them. Let's, that sort of thing. But I think that the religions that go fear-based on things, it's like, when we break away, we almost break away violently.
And because there's no other choice. Like,
Yep.
when you are in that intensive of a fear-based religion, there's no leaving gently. There just isn't,
Yep.
And it's the same thing with like parenting and leaving parents that are like a fear-based. Cause like, when I had my kid, and I think that was sort of when I really started thinking about religion, of like, the religion I'm in currently is anti how I want my kid to participate in his life. I want him to be informed and to make the decisions, instead of being like, okay, well, here are the things where the fear is around, so I have to do this thing. I do not want to do that, And so that's, yeah. I mean, if love were a part of multiple parts of life, it would be so much better.
Yeah.
Just in general.
But it's hard, like, especially when we weren't modeled that as kids. Like, it is so messy when we break away from what we were modeled and try to slip into how we want to be because we didn't have it modeled. We have no idea what respecting a man looks like on that level, or, respecting ourselves looks like, or challenging the quote unquote, normal life that people live. We don't know what that looks like.
No. And I remember telling my therapist I felt like an alien in the world because, I mean, genuinely in these such closed off communities, the kids don't have any other worldview. Like everything is controlled. How they dress, what they watch, what they listen to. I didn't listen to modern radio until I was like 14 years old. I was so much older. And a lot of them are homeschooled. And so that's even more narrowing perspective. And I mean, that goes into multiple different layers of like not only religious, but also cultural and race and all of these different things that these kids just don't have any type of experience in because that was their life. And you get into your early 20s and you're like, okay, well, I've seen a little bit of the actual world now. I have to leave. And everything is so enmeshed in those communities. So when you leave, it actually does create a torrent of people's lives feeling uprooted because it is so enmeshed. And I really had to work through not feeling responsible for people legitimately going into like depressions or having to like crazy situations because I made a decision to leave and get a divorce. It ended up causing like a huge community effect because it's so enmeshed. My identity was not my own, it was theirs. So naturally, when I left, their identity had to reform. And that's difficult. It is.
That's an interesting perspective I've never thought of before, how it does, just like you said, disrupt their way of living, but that's on them. Like you said, like that is their responsibility. That is not your responsibility. But oh my gosh, how difficult, especially people that you grew up having a connection with, having emotional ties with, that now you feel responsible for.
Absolutely. I mean, because there's nothing worse than like your parent or your grandparent saying, this is the worst day of my life, is you doing this. And I know that it is. I
Yeah.
don't agree with it, but I 100% know that the choices that they have made for their life and the way that they view the world, this is the worst day of their life. Their life is worse now. And I still think every day of so many of my family members going to bed with crippling anxiety because they're like, she's going to hell and she's going to take her kid with her and I'll never see her in eternity. That sucks. And that is something after I was done being angry of people believing that I was like, that if I still believed that and my own kid made that decision, how my entire life would be upended if that was actually my belief of the world because I refuse to go outside of it. That does suck. And I do feel bad for them, even though I'm like, and this is the bed you made. You must lie in it. However, that hurts. It still does.
Yeah.
Like they're doing even them, with the perspective that they have and the views and beliefs that they have, they are doing the best they can. Like they are
Yeah.
genuinely coming from a place of where they're worried about you. They have the fear that is so ingrained in them that it does affect them deeply. But again, you have to do what's best for you. And, living that lifestyle, it is so boxed in and is so narrow. And when you have such a big personality and you have such a big, goals and dreams for yourself, you can't comfortably fit in that little box anymore.
No, no. And it's also very difficult. It took me a long time to be able to live with like two things can be true all at once, even if they're like the most extreme differences of like, yes, you truly believe that you love me so much, you will like pray in a closet for 3 days straight to get me here. And I am like, and on the other side of that, I'm like, but you can't because you only want to know about 15% of my life. Every other part of it, you pretend doesn't exist. So to me, I'm like, you can't actually love a person. You can't. But to them it is. And it was hard for me to be able to let those things be true, but I had to because I didn't want to not be empathetic to their situation, because that doesn't it helped me heal more when I was like everything that they did was not inherently to harm. It was to fear. And even if it meant to hurt somebody into making the choice that they thought was right, even though it's, sucks.
Yeah. I'm almost wondering if there's like, and I imagine people go through this differently, but like there is a point where you kind of pull into yourself and you do this introspection, and then you kind of go outward afterwards, and you can you not really introspect other people, but you can see more of where they come from. Like you'll never truly know exactly how they're feeling from that perspective, but after you do the own self-awareness and self-healing, you do kind of turn outwards, and then you can accept other people for who they are and what they're going through.
Absolutely. That is so true. And sort of like in my gap year, my mental health gap year, I was such a recluse. I just went inside and I stayed that way. And I kind of didn't talk to a lot of anybody. I did my work and I went back home and I was just sort of quiet and things. And I think that that was really important of like, yeah, I mean, everybody's going to have their own realities. And I came from a reality that I broke away from, and I don't agree with any aspect of it. I I can't be like I can't be as mean to them as they were to me in good, you know what I mean? I just can't do that, and I won't do it.
Do you think that sometimes people, when they break out of something so restrictive, that oftentimes when they break out, they go to the extreme opposite of, well, I wasn't allowed to do this, so I'm going to go do everything that I wasn't allowed. And then, okay, then we get through that cycle and we deal with some stuff. And then we kind of come back around and like, okay, we're going to settle here in the middle somewhere. I think that might be where you're like, okay, I can understand, I can see that those people, or my parents or whomever it was, really do even still love me and want the best. That's just all that they know. And so
Yeah.
for them, I'm sorry. And I love you and thank you for loving me. But this is my path. This is where I need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like life gets so messy during those. I remember when I was 16 watching Amish Gone Wild on TLC and being like, I totally agree with everything they're doing right now. And I did it. I really did. I didn't do like hard drugs or drinking, but I'd have a video on TikTok where I did join a rec soccer league. I do not play soccer. I'm not a sports person. To get wrecked by the soccer league. I was like, I'm in. I'm down to clown. Anybody, let's do it. Just balls deep, never kicked a ball in the soccer league. And so, absolutely, I think you swing the other way and you kind of have to go through. My sister and I call it the villain era because she came from this too. And she and I now live in the same town. And so we definitely are able to kind of relate to each other on these experiences of like, you kind of got to swing really hard and then it settles in and you can't villainize yourself for being a chaos monster, an absolute chaos monster. And anyone who knew me during that summer, I'm like, yeah, I was a chaos monster. Cause they were like, remember when you did this thing or that person? I would be like, absolutely, absolutely. And I feel bad that I just wrecked and left, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And now I'm way better off.
Well, you also have to test like who you're not too, right? Like
Yeah.
especially like little boys trying on dresses and stuff. Let them do it. They're testing who they're not. Like if anything that, they have to experience that, and if they do like it, they like it. Let them be. But like the other things of like, doing things that you are not a soccer player, but doing that, you now know deeply that you are not a soccer player. I'm sure going
One
into it, you're like, I have this, maybe possibility that I am, and then no, you're not.
No, I'm not. I just like I like the people who run around on the fields and then they can run me into wherever. That's fine. Yeah. I think it is
I
like
feel
a
like there's
very
some rom-coms coming out of this somehow, somewhere down the line.
Ah!
Who wants hockey romance? Let's do soccer romance.
Let's do a freshly divorced mom wanting to get wrecked by her rec soccer league, and it's just another memoir of mine. And I say it's fiction because I can't be like, yeah, nonfiction. Read about my wild sex life. Summer I was divorced. So yeah, but it is fun to try on different parts. Like that is one thing that I will always be grateful for of when you grow up in such a little box. Everything about life is so much cooler. Everything is a puddle to jump in. Everything is cool. It's always people watching. And I will never forget the times where I was like, I'm going to try on this outfit today and see how I feel. And then just there was no shame in that. Like there wasn't a weird high school kind of stigma around me trying to find myself because I found myself so much later. And I was an adult and I just didn't care at all what people thought because I was like, my mom doesn't like me. You plebeians have nothing on me. Okay. I have I have hit the quota. So I don't care what you think. And so I just tried on a bunch of different, things and see how they felt. And yeah, it's hard and fun to sort of find yourself 10 years after people usually say that they do. But I mean, it's always a journey. You never do. I learn new things about myself every day and I like it like that.
Yeah, I reserve the right to grow and change, like always.
Amen. And to that, I say amen after not having said it for years. Amen.
That's awesome.
I think that coming from a place of such restrictiveness and honestly a lack of grace gives you the capacity to have more grace for other people still in that position, but also just in general in life in general, that you have a little bit more capacity to extend that to other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I mean, when you live life and death forever, hell and heaven, and people, if they start defining themselves by their failures, I'm like, no, 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 it's fine. Literally, you're totally good. You messed up at work. It's fine. Because I live so many of my mistakes of like, am I going to hell for this if God comes back? When I was 11. And so now I'm like, that's not the case. Oh, it's fine. Mistake up all you want. It'll be fine. We're all humans.
You're like, it doesn't get worse than what I've experienced. You'll be fine. You'll get through this.
It'll be, yeah, minor failings at work is fine. You're going to be okay. Sometimes somebody's not going to like you. That means that you're just a strong cup of tea. I'd rather be a strong cup of tea than a cup of water that somebody feels like they have to drink.
That's a good analogy. So I do stickers. I try to think of stickers for each episode and I create them. And I think that that's going to be a sticker. I love that. I'd rather be a strong cup
Yeah.
of tea.
That's good. I think that too, just expanding on that just a little bit, that it also when you do come through on the other side of situations like that, it also helps you handle life in a much different through a different lens, right? Because life is hard and you're always going to have shit that you're going to go through always. And so you can come at those situations, don't you feel like, with a much better outlook and a broader outlook on that, rather than like, oh, I'm totally fucked. I'm not gonna make, this is like the end of the world. It's not. I've been through worse
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's like the end of it. It might be the end of the world today, but every day is just like it's just a sailboat of life. And I mean, obviously, I'm coming of that at that from like a very privileged position of I'm a white woman and I am financially stable, so obviously, like everybody's sailboats of life are going to look different. But yeah, I think that there's more of a sort of riding the waves scenario when you go through that many things of like, okay, yes, this is today, but tomorrow will be different. I do have less patience now for specifically situationships because there's just some things I've lost the patience for. I'm like, don't spend time in that. Do they not like you? Leave, please. I cannot listen to this. No, 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 don't do it. Don't go down that way. But yeah, that's the only one I swung harder the other way. Everything else, I'm like, it's just, it'll be fine.
That's funny that you said that because I too find myself like my time is so much more valuable to me than what it was, when I was younger. And like if I if I don't like something or if I'm not enjoying something, I give it the, allotted time to test it. I do test things still, but if it's like, oh, that's not for me, I do walk away much quicker than what I did when I was younger.
Oh yeah, you've spent enough time. You spent enough time in situations where there's nothing in it for you except you expending your own energy into it. Audi 5000. Can't catch me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like how you mentioned, like, especially whenever things are going through situations, expending brain energy in like a positive and motivational way. And if you go through something very traumatic, you have shifted it into, now you get to do creations that is putting out there such a more beautiful thing than what you actually experienced, and allowing other people to connect to you in a way that is different and deep and real.
Yeah. And I think there's sort of two ways when something really big happens in people's lives. And it's definitely this way for me. Either you need to like sleep for a year or you have so much pent up energy, you're either going to implode on yourself or you have to get it out there. And so that's kind of when I started like a little painting illustration business on the side, and I started knitting, and I started kind of, sharing bits and pieces and putting that really intensive kind of curdling energy into channeling it into something, as you said, because it is going to live in my brain and it's going to live in my body. And I would rather use that kind of nervous energy that you get of like, oh God, I just need to take a walk, or I can't believe this happened, and putting it into something that serves me, serves what I want in my life, serves the community of people I have. And that has really helped keep my head on my shoulders.
That's fair. Well, kind of going into your creations, you and the neighbor have started a podcast. Is that right?
We certainly have. We did. Yes, indeed.
What is the topics that you guys intend to kind of dive into?
So, yes. So, our podcast is called Book Lover Featuring Lover, or Book Lover Feet Lover. And yes, I did do that connotation there because I am smutty and chaotic and I thought it was funny. Anyways, so he had the idea. I was like, we should start a podcast. And then he had the idea of like, I obviously read a ton of books and he hasn't. And so each month I pick a book that I've read that I really like, and he reads it and reacts to it. And so we spend a month on a book in a different genre. We started with romance with Emily Henry's Book Lovers because we had to, because it was the title of the podcast. And we just finished Legends and Lattes for our Cozy Fantasy Month. And now we're on Smut Month, where we're reading Morning Glory Milking Farm. And so we
Is
read
that
chapters
the
a week.
bovine that you were talking about on
Absolutely, it is. Yes, absolutely it is. Grade A certified beef, if you will. That is our podcast topic this month. And so yeah, he's reacting to the book much like, kind of popular podcast situations where people are reacting to Gilmore Girls for the first time with a big huge fan who's like, yeah. And so that's sort of what we're doing, where he's reacting and I'm sort of taking him through what these tropes are. I'm also coming at it. I was a college professor for 2 years and taught a script analysis and storytelling and literature and stuff like that. And so I'm also coming at it from that of like, yes, let me explain to you these tropes and different things that he has questions about. But it's very, very fun. And he's also an actor and he's got a big, deep voice. So he's very nice to listen to. I mean, obviously I'm coming at it from a biased situation. But anyways, that is our podcast. So
That's
very
fun.
fun.
So with that, do you find it that it's a different realm to step into, or do you find it similar to like doing your social media videos and things like that?
I feel like it's pretty similar. I like that it's long form because so much of what I've done has been short form. And I like that it is just audio instead of video. So I don't have to worry about editing things together. So it's different, but in a good way. And it's only on Patreon. And so that's also nice to have like a little tighter of a community and things. And it's weekly, every Monday. It gets posted at 6 a.m. for people who do morning listening, which is usually when I'm doing it. So yeah, that's our podcast.
Do you
Exciting.
have favorite tropes that you read in within the romance genre? Do you have favorite tropes that you read? Do you have tropes that you absolutely will not read?
Oh, that's a great question. I like to read a lot of different things. There are some things that I really enjoy. I'm such a sucker for an enemies to lovers. I'm a sucker for like a morally gray woman or man. Like I'm a big Nesta fan. I really like that she's an unlikable female character in the Sarah J. Maas universe
Yep.
situation.
Yeah.
I Yeah, and I one of the reasons why I love book lovers is because Nora, the main character, she is not very lovable. She's very prickly. So I really love when a female main character isn't like, I'm sunshine and everything's nice, because that I relate to that. Um, so those are some of my favorite. I'm trying to think of a trope that I'm like, oh, I really hate this. I don't mind a miscommunication trope, only because I'm the queen of miscommunicating, so I can't really judge characters when they do that. And yeah, I'm entertained by most things. It's hard for me to dislike something unless I just really don't like the writing. I acknowledge it's not for me. I guess I don't like pregnancy tropes in smut. Like sometimes they get into
Like a
weird.
surprise pregnancy when like he's not really into. No, that's not me.
Yeah, sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes like when the pregnancy is the impetus for them getting together and then they fall in love, I'm like, well, that's a little bit archaic and not the best way. You know what I mean? Like if we're gonna have archaic ideologies, then let the Fae guy be 380 years old and whatever. So there are some things that just aren't, they're just not my thing. But for the most part, I like most things. I kind of enjoy many of the things that I read. So yeah, that's I guess the tropes I enjoy.
So, with your neurodivergence and storytelling being the way that you have kind of worked through a lot of emotions and things like that, were there like times in your childhood that, stand out to you now where you're like, oh, that was a subset of my neurodivergence? Because I imagine that was something you found later in life, right?
It was something I found later in life, very,
Yeah.
very late. Yes, I was a very high masking autistic person. Yes, I mean, so much of my childhood now, I look back and I'm like, oh, you poor, wild, chaos, feral beast thing. I really had issues because I was homeschooled. I really had issues when I couldn't sit in my seat at the table or my seat felt different. I wouldn't be able to focus. I would get in trouble, of course. And but I like it would make me so angry. And so for a lot of my childhood, I thought I was just a very angry kid. Like I would have outbursts where I would yell about dumb things or like if my coat smelled like food, specifically my coat, for whatever reason, I guess the texture mixed with it being a smell, I would have like an angry outburst. And so they just thought I was kind of a mean, wild child. And on another part of that, so we had this weird thing where, yes, we grew up like very in a box in our minds, but we also were like semi on our own in the house. So like I would go out into the forest a lot and just kind of like get lost in the forest, which was not safe. We weren't in an area where there was good. And I would just God, this is so autistic kid, but I would just like eat leaves off the ground to test it. And I would get sick sometimes. And because I was like, I must understand what this leaf tastes like. And so I'd eat the leaf. And I was like 7 out literally in the woods. And so when I tell you I was a feral child, I was actually a feral child, like out in the woods eating sticks and dirt and bugs and leaves and stuff. Because I would be like, what does this texture taste like? And so that's probably why I have so many food allergies today, is because I ruined my stomach. I was an autistic kid eating shit out in the forest. Like, who does that? What?
That's funny. My son used to eat dandelions, like not like the pretty yellow ones, the white ones with the fluff. And I was like, oh, how could but he won't eat mashed potatoes. Explain that to me. Like, that's okay, the fluffiness, but mashed potatoes, nope, can't do that texture.
I know. Listen, I couldn't eat any type of bean. I had so many texture issues, but you would be finding me knee deep in literal dirt eating it. And I would not touch like sauteed spinach. I'd be like slime, goo, disgusting.
That's called a mud pie from my generation. I eat mud pies all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, just the only difference is I made my cake and I ate it too.
That's great. I love whenever the stories sneak up on people that's like, oh yeah, that's personal. Should I really be sharing that? Ah, fuck it.
Yeah, it is what it is. Everybody's eating a bug, right?
Yeah, a worm.
I remember
Anyway.
I grew up in a very small town as well, and we had black ants. In the south, I'm from Colorado, but in the south there's fire ants. We did not have those black ants. And my brother, myself, and another friend of the family or whatever, like we had like an ant eating contest, like who could eat the most black ants. I did not win because gross, but yeah, it was a thing. Like that's just what you did.
No, I did. I have actively participated in that. I 100%. I was not in a competition with other people. I was just by myself, being like, "What do these ants taste like?" So, yeah.
I love that. I love that you mentioned that like you thought you were angry. Like that was something that I imagine you kind of believed as a child, was just like, oh, I'm an angry kid. And like for example, my son, he's the texture kid, and he tags in his shirt would just irritate him, and he didn't talk until he was almost 5. And so like when he was very young, we thought he was just very aggressive to other kids and stuff like that, but then we found out like, oh, he actually is just suffering in this shirt and these clothes all day long, and he's irritable because he cannot communicate that with us.
Absolutely. And it's so hard for young kids because, like, it's like as an adult, if somebody was poking you in the face all day long. And so at the end of the day, you're like, oh, that's it. You're done. You're exiting this mortal coil. It's over. I can't do this anymore. And I mean, it also can feel like very shameful if you don't know it, you know? I mean, even as an adult, I thought that I might just not like living with people because I would feel these outbursts of like something was out of place or something smelled weird or whatever, like something to other people it's very small and kind of almost embarrassing of like that's what you're upset about, and it's like, yes, I'm so deeply upset about it and I don't know why. Maybe I just don't like living with people. But yeah, I mean, as kids and as adults, some of those things can make you, you know, really suffer socially and have a lot of inward shame when really it's like, oh, that's your brain. You'll figure it out. But, you
How
know,
did
it
you
takes a
work through that?
diagnosis.
What was your process of working through that to where you came from feeling like you're angry to realizing that it was just triggers for you and things like that?
It took me finally talking about it. So I had an experience which, after talking to other autistic people who got diagnosed late in their life, they had a very similar experience. I was diagnosed with like several different things before I was diagnosed with autism, which is common. At first, it was like OCD, then it was CPTSD, and then it was bipolar 2, but not quite. And so I went on all of these different treatment plans for that. Nothing quite worked because at the end of the day, I was still having a breakdown if my house smelled like food. That was like a really big thing for me, or if it was smoky or something like that. Finally, the second to last session, I got screened, and my therapist was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Do research," because we were, you know, coming to a close. And it took me talking about it, and I didn't talk to it about it with anybody. And I was living with the neighbor at this point in my life, and I was scared that it was wrong because I had gone through so many different diagnoses, and I was like, I don't have enough data. I need to do research, which I should have done then. I was like, but it must be right before I say it. um, and so finally, when I did research, and TikTok was actually really helpful of people explaining like how their, you know, autism manifested in these little bits that triggered them and things. And so I sort of went on a journey of self-acceptance of like, okay, I am not mad at a person. I am not mad at a thing. I'm not mad at myself. I am just activated right now. Let me figure out how to do that. And then from there, I was able to talk to the people I lived with, or even my kiddo sometimes, because like my kiddo is also neurodivergent and I'm his like favorite person but I'm not like a touch person. And he's like, my mom is my everything. And so at the end of the day, sometimes I'm like, you must sit there and you cannot touch me, or I'm gonna deal with like, you know, that neurodivergent mom sort of rage or like overstimulation of I have been touched to the point of max capacity. So I think just like talking about it has really helped me, even with my kid and even with the people I live with, and in saying like, it is not your fault. I am not mad at you. I'm overstimulated. This is not even my fault. I'm not taking, you know, I need to make sure that I'm communicating this. Like my job in this is communicating, I'm overstimulated by this XYZ. And that takes work on my end. And it is work I should be doing on my end if I, you know, have the tools to do it. And then from there, everybody's just, we all have the information, you know, like my kid has the information that I have hung on to mom's leg while she's trying to do something too much. I'm going to give her space. My partner has the information of when he cooks food that's really smelly, he opens the doors and helps mitigate the smell so that it's not as much of an activation for me. And he'll text me like, hey, I'm going to make this. Cause I also don't want anybody to feel like they're on eggshells in my house. I know what my triggers are, but that doesn't mean that other people have to live with those. I live with those, and I will take the steps necessary to sort of make sure that those are taken care of. So yeah, that was sort of a rambling
No, I
situation,
love
but
that. And there was a piece that I caught in there too, like a lot of parents will shame themselves when they set those boundaries with their kids, like, oh, I don't want my kid to touch me. That's I feel like you should now be a bad mom because you don't want that. But you are setting a boundary with your kid, and you are teaching them that they can set boundaries as well, and that that's okay, and it does not take away from the love or the affection that you have. It's just right now mommy needs no touch.
Absolutely. And I did feel guilt a lot, especially when he was like tinier and I didn't he did not he wasn't going to be able to understand, but in the moments where I felt the worst about it, I would also remember like I want him to be able to communicate this when he's older. I want him to know if I'm feeling XYZ or I have a boundary, I'm going to communicate it and I expect people to listen. And on the flip side of that, for him to be able to practice now, just because I want to feel connection this way, that doesn't automatically entitle me to that. I have to ask, or, you know, I need to make sure that I'm respecting boundaries in this relationship, even if it's like the closest a relationship can be. That doesn't mean that somebody's boundaries don't change. And that's okay. That's a conversation that shouldn't have shame around it. He's not wrong. I'm not wrong. It's just the day. And that's okay. But it takes a while to get there, you know, and they're little and it's hard.
There's two things in there that I wanted to ask you. One, do you think that um, you went through these other diagnoses, right? And then you got to the autism or that part of it. Do you feel like that our medical community, our mental health community is also kind of growing with everybody along that way? So do you think that maybe some of these diagnoses maybe weren't correct or right on the nose, and then you got to the point, oh, okay, this is where we're at? And so do you think that something, because I don't know, I mean, is that something, do you think that's a possibility? Is that something that happens? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think so. I was a psychology major in undergrad, so I'm very aware, and I did part of my master's in clinical mental health counseling. So like mental health has always had a stigma. I mean, until very recently. And so any diagnosis, sometimes there's like a wariness to do so. I think it's becoming a little bit more acceptable now that workplaces aren't going to automatically fire somebody for things, but you know, there's a lot around mental health in general, and there's even more around autism, because there's so many different variations of it. And I mean, my therapist even told me to, if you have a uterus, or if you are a trans person, if you are not a cis white man, sometimes it can be like dangerous to have autism on your medical record because it will make advocating for your own reproductive health care difficult. So if I decided I didn't want to have kids anymore, that can make it difficult because there's autism or anxiety or depression on my chart. So I think like even though there's sort of a more societal acceptance of mental health and autism and those types of diagnoses, I would still say that like in a medical corporate sense of the world, I think there's more exceptions to the rule of things more so. I think there's still a lot around it. And I'm very lucky that I'm in a profession as an actor where mostly everybody I work with is very mentally ill and or autistic. That's just like what we're attracted to be doing. But I know several people who are in corporate positions where their mental diagnoses, they keep a secret so that they're not, you know, passed over for projects, because it's like, oh, this person has depression. Will they be able to do it? So yeah. I guess yes and no. There's acceptance and there's not, depending on what community you're in.
Yeah, yeah. No, and the other thing that I love is that you talked about how you have those moments, right, where where you just kind of need a break from your kid, and like, I just don't just give me a minute. And I think that a lot of moms, especially new moms, go through those moments, and it's, postpartum depression or whatever. And and they feel really guilty about that. Like they're now a bad mom because, like, I'm super sad and I should be happy. I should be so happy, right? That I have this beautiful little child. And yes, but also, I think that it's so great to, even if you aren't in the neurodivergent spectrum or in that area, like it's still okay to have all of these emotions and, you know, and like take care of yourself in that way and to draw those boundaries.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, parenthood is so all encompassing and it's so easy to villainize ourselves for like very human wants of wanting to be alone or wanting like please don't cry again, please don't say my name again. And I think again, I think there's lots of fear around it of like, oh, but you know, these people had this like terrible experience and what have you, I'm sure they would give anything XYZ. It's so easy to have that discourse in your brain with parenthood because you want to do it right. You know, that's the
Right.
thing with these people who feel awful is like they want so badly to be doing it correctly. But I think
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, doing it right, it's just you have a human, you are a human. Your human needs to know how to human. And part of that is like, I saw my parent human make a mistake and apologize. Great. I saw my parent human get overwhelmed and then figure it out. Great. Like that's part of it. I don't want to, I think it took me a long time to be like, oh, I don't need to be a perfect anything for my kid. What I need to be is like, hey, this is who I am and I love you so much and I want to support you. Also, you have to accept that I am a human, you know? And no matter if you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, like no one wants to be cried at 24/7.
No.
Like no one wants that. No one does. No one wants to be in pain. No one wants to have poop on the floor. Like that's okay to be upset about. It's weird that it's happening. Parenthood's crazy. It's crazy. I have to tell somebody to not put something in their mouth for the 18th time because I don't want you to die. I'm sorry, I don't want you to die. And now you're mad at me. And of course, as a human, it's like I can't this is wild. And that's parenthood, you know, of just like wild situations. Of course, you're going to get upset.
Absolutely.
And I think too, like accepting that our kids are all going to have trauma. Even if we give them the most perfect life ever, they're going to, like, for example, my son, he is so self-aware that when he has friendships, he will set boundaries with kids and he is 12 years old and like other kids don't do that. They don't know how to do that. So it isolates him. He is very isolated from, you know, the majority of kids because he's like, oh, you're bullying. I'm not going to be friends with you. Oh, you know, he's just very aware of things. And he's gonna have some shit because of that. But also he can process it easier. But again, he's still gonna have the traumas, even though he is so much more of a healthy child than, you know, typical children. Everyone's gonna screw up their kids. Like it's just gonna happen. We're all of our kids are gonna have shit they have to go through.
Oh, yeah. And they gotta. It's, I mean, that's just the world. Like, I don't want to purposely do it, but at the end of the day, like, he already is in a split home. So, I mean, that's a card that he'll probably have to deal with in therapy at some point in his life, probably. And that just is what it is. Like, I can't, you know, there's choices that kids are going to make. And I'm not directly responsible for fixing every single part of their life. And it is so sweet that your 12-year-old's able to like set those boundaries. And that's so wonderful. And it's like a skill that not even people in their 30s and 40s have. But you're so right. Like other kids are gonna be like, who is this?
Yeah.
Who is this
Like I don't want to
person?
be friends with you. You're mean. And he's like, no, I just know my limits.
Yeah. And that's awesome. King mode. King
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah.
Hard to
But
feel good about it.
but he shelf self shames himself so hard with it because kids are brutal. Kids are so brutal.
They are. They are. And there's like only so much you can't, you know, like I'm not going to be able to mitigate when people are mean to Harvey because he's like, if you're not going to do it right, then we're not going to be friends, you know? Or like if you talk in class, out. We're out of here. You know,
Rules are
like
so
that's
important with them.
yes, yeah. And it's like, okay, well these and you like these are the choices that you make.
Yep.
That's okay. That's what you're going to do. I make those too. So
Like, do you remember when you were a kid how like the argument would happen? I don't know if you experienced this, but like you're like, "Oh, you're not my best friend anymore." And you know, that was like an argument where kids are like arguing about whether or not they're best friends, but like kids who have acceptance of other people setting their boundaries, they're just like, "Okay."
oh,
And it's like
absolutely.
there's no
I was like,
argument.
yeah. I was like, well, I'm not going to fight you on that. Oh, cool. Okay. You don't want to be my friend? Oh, no. I'm 12. What? And I also think one thing that for especially like neurodivergent kids, when they've got like big picture situations, it's hard. Like they just care about things differently than other kids do, which there's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just like they're like, I've seen my kid interact with another kid and they're the same age, and the kid really cares about, this very like a cartoon character. And my kid will be like, why? It's not real.
Yeah.
What? And I'm like, oh, honey, you are 5, buddy. It's going to be a long, you're going to come into yourself probably around like 24. But until then, it's going to be a lot of those situations.
That's so funny. Oh, I love that. So you have a trip coming up to go on a book nerd adventure.
Yes. Yes. Trovo Trip reached out to me and they were like, do you want to host a bookish event abroad with you, a +1 and 20 people? And I was like, absolutely. There are 10 spots left, which is so exciting. And we are doing cozy adventures in Croatia. We're going to Split and Dubrovnik, and we're going to do bookshop hopping. And I've sort of created it to be neurodivergent friendly, where we get all of the like exciting stuff out in the day and then nights kind of low stimulus. I'll be teaching ADHD and writing workshops. We'll be doing knitting circles, and the neighbor's going to be there. We're going to do a live podcast. He's going to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time. So it's just going to be, yeah, it's going to be a cozy little adventure abroad with people, whoever it wants to and is able to tag along.
So how do people get more information on that if they're interested in joining?
Yes, you can Google Summer England Croatia Trovo Trip, or you can go to my Instagram or TikTok, and the link in my bio will take you. You'll see Cozy Adventures in Croatia on my link tree, and it'll take you to claim your spot if you wish for it. And we are going next June, and you have 8 months to pay the total. It's not all due at the same time, so if that is something that's helpful, that is definitely there for anybody who would like to go.
Summer, do you think that this is one of the ways for you to, because you mentioned you don't look at your DMs, you don't, it's hard to connect with people, honestly, when you're just doing the content creation and not really interacting. Is this like the best way and something that excites you to be able to connect to your fans or the people that, want to be part of your tribe? Essentially.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm so excited. And I think part of the reason I've tried to respond to some DMs, but I get so many of them and I also don't know what to say, because usually they're just like people being really nice and I don't want to be like, thanks. And so I'm excited to like it's also structured, like we're there to adventure. So we're not just like openly hanging out, which I don't understand. What do we talk about? Like what? And so it's like books and adventure and knitting and kind of these nerdy places that we get to go. And I think I'm really excited to be able to do that with people and have like a closer connection with people. Because I mean, going on an adventure for 5 days, you're gonna go away from that with friendships. And I'm very excited about that.
Going on an adventure. You're so Lord of the Rings. Hobbit.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Am I calling our little gaggle crew the Fellowship? 100%.
You absolutely should.
Absolutely I am.
Is there a ring at the end or?
Yeah, precisely.
Now there is
20 rings, and then there's one ring that rules them all.
Right?
Yes. Amen. Again,
and
for the
by
second
the
time.
end of it, if you kind of look a little bit like Schmeagol, it's fine. That means that trip was worth it.
Yes, and I would say out of all of the characters, I do relate to Schmeagol the most, because he's just like trying to do his best and he's just crazy and wild, and I do like him for that. I can't fault him for that. He wants what he wants. He wants what he wants.
Now, your book, you have 2 that are coming out. So the one that you're writing that is kind of encompassing the story of you and your neighbor, that one is not out yet, correct?
No, that one's probably, I mean, that one's on the back burner until further notice. Like I've got it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with it.
Gotcha. So
yeah.
The other one is, what do you have a date set, or is it still just kind of very much in the works?
So it is finished and it is edited. It is on submission with publishers right now. So I'm very much at the at the beginning of the official process of it all, which is exciting and terrifying and exciting.
I love whenever it's, a lot of times people will put books out there into the world and they grow a following based off of their stories, but then people get to know the author later on down the line. And you are going at it at the complete opposite direction, where it's like everyone who's going to read your book in, at least when it first releases, know you and they know your story, and that's how they connect to that book.
Yes, it is already, there is a big kind of parasocial following. And I've posted a few videos of, because the main characters' names are Clara and Hesper. And so I posted a few kind of scenes of them. And so there's, like 120,000 people who have already been like, I would like to, when is this? And so it's nice to be like, I don't answer DMs, but a lot of what I do, I like that people have actively participated in. Like they might have commented a thing that they would like to see that's in the book. And I might not have directly told them, but so much of this book is here and created because of the inspiration and the conversations I've seen happening in the comments or in DMs or what have you. And so it's exciting to see if it's going to be able to be in the hands of people.
That is the best and smartest marketing strategy I've ever heard. Like, you have your audience and you're like, what do you want? And they're like, this is what I want. And you're like, here you go.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I so fell ass first into that book because I did, like, I acted out the scene before I wrote it, and then people freaked out about it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll write it then. We'll see what happens. And yeah, now we're here. So we'll see.
Was there, and I'm jumping around again, but I want to kind of final and wrap up with this little piece of like, was there a transition of like when you write your skits, and the way that you present them, what transition do you have to get them into a story?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I guess I think some of them, like the first one, it was more like the tropes of the characters, because what I found out for me as an author is that I'm very character based. I think about like what would the character do next more so than like we need a plot device here sort of situation. And so I kind of started out as these two tropes of people, and kind of consolidating them in with music and things, and posting it online. And then from there, like, how would those two people interact in, this type of setting or going on this type of adventure? So it's sort of, I'm sort of taking caricatures that I've created in my brain with a Hosier track playing in the background. And yeah, putting them in different costumes and things. It's almost like paper dolls in my brain, as a kid, where you're like, I'm going to put them in different stuff and see what happens. And that's kind of what happens when a character is sort of born from a trope in my brain and I post it, and then I'm like, oh, I want to write them out and see what happens. So yeah, that's how it comes to fruition.
That's exciting. So do you have multiple scenarios written out then? Multiple characters with their different stories?
Yeah. Most of the ones that I think there's been two, and it is just Clara and Hesper, but they did start out as kind of like a trope situation. But yes, I do have, like, in my own little notes on my phone, I have like these different bits of characters. And so I'm excited once I get this cozy fantasy sort of done. I'm working on a second one right now with entirely different characters. And I'm excited to do kind of a similar model of like, here are the tropes of these characters interacting with each other. How do I put it into video form and communicate exactly what I want based on what's already been written or the tropes at play?
That's exciting. Well, Summer, I thank you so much for your time. This was a great podcast. I love your personality, and I love that I could connect with you and feel like I got to know you through, an hour and 30 minutes of just awesome content.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been lovely to talk to both of you, and I'm really grateful to be able to like go down different roads and things, because every part of the story is part of the story. So thank you so much for allowing that opportunity and doing so with two wonderful people.
All right.
Great.
Well, readers, listeners, watchers, however you are consuming this, go follow Summer, hype her up for her book that's coming out. And that's all we have for this episode. See you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.